Welcome to Through the Eyes of a Cricketer here on TV Arcana. Today we have a magnificent guest, a man of great stature, of great Australian folklore as far as I'm concerned in terms of cricket. That is Doug Walters. Welcome, Doug. I'm glad you're here today. We've got a lot to talk about. In fact, I'm not sure where I'm going to start, but I'm going to start with my own personal experience. When I was an 8-year-old kid, I went to the Village Green there at University of New South Wales, and you were my hero at the time, and I saw you sitting there with a cigarette in your hand and some cards in front of you, and you bent over and talked to me and said, "Hey son, would you like to put the number 8 on the scoreboard?" That's a memory that I'm going to take away for the rest of my life. In fact, we've talked about that already. Tell us about that day. You've got some stories to tell, I'm sure.
Well, firstly, it's a pleasure to be with you. But I'm not sure whether I only played at the Village Green a couple of times, but my biggest memory of the Village Green was the fact that I used to play cricket with a club called Cumberland Cricket Club, which has now changed its name to Parramatta. But we used to play all-day games, which used to start at 10 o'clock, and the normal games were 1 till 6. So it was 10 to 6 or 1 to 6. And I thought it was an all-day game this particular day, so I arrived at the Village Green about 9:15. I looked out, there was no other cars in the place. The curator was out there mowing the wicket. I walked out and he said, "Doug," he said, "you're early today." And I said, "Why?" He said, "The game doesn't start at 1 o'clock. And I said, "Oh no." So I had my wife with me and we had our picnic lunch. We went down to Coogee Beach. We had our sandwiches, a cup of tea. And we were just taking our time, thinking that we had plenty of time to come back. I get back, I get tangled up in the Randwick race traffic on the way back, but that was okay. 12:20, I still thought I had plenty of time. I drive in, and they're out in the ground playing cricket. And I thought, what is going on here? I just had time to change into my creams. We were 2 for 20, incidentally, at this stage. I just had time to jump into my creams and basically walk straight out to bat as the third wicket fell. And I know that Watson and Jeff Lawson were opening the bowling. I went on to get 100. So I should have been late all the time, I suppose.
Exactly.
And I don't know about your scoreboard. That must have been the other game that I played. The cigarettes are gone these days. The cards are still out occasionally.
I saw, I think, a few beers down the side, but we won't talk about that right now. So, Doug, looking through your career, there's some amazing moments, such as when you scored the 100 in a session and your 250 against New Zealand. But take us back to the first time you walked out to Lords. Through the eyes of a cricketer, I'd like to hear what your experience was there at Lords.
Well, I guess as a young cricketer, your desires are to play. If you want to play Test cricket, and they were always my desires as a young kid from 5 or 6 year old, my ambition was to play Test cricket for Australia. And it was to play a Test at the Sydney Cricket Ground and to play at Lords. I guess they're the two major things that a cricketer in Australia admire to, and perhaps at the MCG these days as well. But my first appearance at Lords, we played against the MCC. I'm walking out through the long room and these guys are saying, "You'll be back in a minute, young fella, we'll see you in a minute." And I went out, Ian Redpath is on strike. Very first ball, he plays to Silly Medoff and call for a run. And I was silly enough to leave my crease. So my first appearance at Lords, I got run out by 18 yards without facing a ball. So it wasn't the greatest experience of all time, I can tell you.
It certainly wasn't. But I didn't stop there, of course. You did many good things after that.
Well, those guys, when I walked back through the long room, said, "I told you you'd be back in a minute, didn't I?" And they're quite characters, those guys. They used to say, "Leave the gate open, he'll be back in a minute."
What a great time to have played cricket in your career. Let's talk about other moments. For example, against the Pakistanis here in Australia. Give me an example of some of the players you played there and what your experiences were there.
Oh, well, I guess Imran Khan and Zahir Abbas are the two prominent guys that I can recall. They were very good cricketers. And Pakistanis, we never had a tour for some unknown reason to Pakistan during my cricketing days. When I retired in 1981, they had several tours, bang, 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 to India and Pakistan. I only had one to India, and and no tours at all against Pakistan, but I did play against a couple of test matches here in Australia.
Right. When I think of Zahir Abbas, who you mentioned, he was predominantly a back foot player. One of the questions I often get asked is about batsmen in general. Were they the true greats at the time? Were they true back foot players in your mind?
I think the better players are back foot players, yeah. But it's quite strange when you talk about back foot players. Everyone has a little fidget with their feet before the fast bowler lets the ball go, right? Some people go back and across, some go forward and across. But the back foot players, or the good players, their first step is forward, but they're back foot players. It's only a little step of an inch or two, but that's always forward and then back and across. But
Okay.
yeah,
Well,
so
you're
it's quite
predominantly
interesting. But most of the guys these days, you'll find, will go. Their first instinct will be back,
right.
not forward.
Okay. You yourself, you were a back foot player, weren't you? Predominantly.
Predominantly, yes, yeah.
Okay. It's interesting because, again, the modern day is all about the hitting power of the batsman. The feet don't really move too much. But in your day, more so, feet was a very important part of your play. Certainly, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, certainly. I'd still think the guys do use their feet quite well, but they use it in a different fashion to what we did. For instance, you see someone come down to drive a spinner, and they will put one foot behind the other, not the old cross step as it used to be. And we used to use the cross step. We'd get down the wicket another 3 or 4 feet further than the guys do today. But it's something that I've noticed it is different. The guys don't get down. They don't go down the wicket to those if they can't reach it. Okay. Now they come back and play some other shot off the back foot. But just those little things of front foot, back foot are quite interesting.
Now, I want to go back to the time and the several great moments. The time that you were apparently trained by the likes of Kerry Packer. Share us that moment.
Ross Edwards and myself, we were having problems with a short pitch ball, and the first year of World Series cricket, we were up against the best all the time. I mean, there wasn't any respite. There was no going back to play club cricket or charity matches or state matches or anything in those days. So we just had to go and try and find form batting against the best guys every day of the week. And then when you're out of form batting against those sort of guys, it's pretty hard to score runs. And even though batting is all confidence, you've still got to score runs to get your confidence back. And so we were having problems with the short pitch ball. And Kerry Packer suggested that we should go into Barry Knight's Cricket Centre in Kent Street in Sydney and sort out this problem we had with the short pitch ball. So he said, I want you in there at 5 o'clock next Friday. Well, we were there at 5 o'clock on the Friday. 5:05, Kerry walked in his suit coat. We were standing in the nets, and Kerry picked up a ball and he said, Barry, this is their problem. he from 3/4 of the way down the wicket, he started throwing these cricket balls, and Kerry had a pretty good arm in those days, the younger days, and he started bouncing the ball at our heads. And Barry said, hey, Kerry, you can't do that. He said, you're going to kill one of these guys. I mean, we didn't have helmets or anything in those days, so he said, you're going to kill. He said, you can't throw cricket balls at them. Maybe if we get tennis balls and get them to do that with the tennis balls, that might help them out. He said, good idea. He said, what I want you guys to do, this is Kerry, he said, I want you to book a squash court. Ross Edwards was living in Sydney here at that time. Somewhere between where you two live, book a squash court, and for an hour every Tuesday and Thursday, I want you to throw tennis balls on that squash court at one another. You know, there wasn't one Tuesday or Thursday for 4 or 5 months we were there that Kerry never rung the squash court to find out whether we were there or not.
Amazing.
And I'm sure he wasn't concerned about the $2 a week he was paying for the hire of the squash court. But he had a genuine interest in the guys, which was great.
Certainly was. I interviewed Barry Knight recently, and he talked about you and the likes of Border and the time that he spent with you. Tell me more about coaching in general at the time, because obviously when you first started, you didn't have a true coach, did you?
No, we never. I guess our school teachers and our fathers were our coaches, and they were keen, but I don't think they knew a particular lot about cricket, which, in my case, was probably a blessing in disguise, because I was able to go and play pretty much the way that I wanted to play anyway. So I think, kids certainly need coaches, but you can be overcoached.
It's a very good point, because in today's modern age, there's a lot of people that talk about the overcoaching of players, or the overperformance through high performance of the players, and they end up not having allowed to bowl when they feel like they need to bowl. Tell us about your thoughts of that now in the current cricket and the way that they approach training and high performance.
Yeah, I think they just they accept that sort of thing. I mean, I'm not a great believer in coaches once you obtain first class level. I don't think there's much a coach can do as far as try and change your technique. Surely they wouldn't be changing your technique once you start playing for New South Wales or Australia, or any other country for that matter. But I think it's more of a guidance. But these guys, I guess they've been brought up with it all their way through their lives. And I mean, I never played under a coach, so I don't really know what they go through, to be quite honest. But I think they expect the coach to be saying something to them.
Which is probably not the best way to be able to be your natural self.
Well, no, particularly if the coach is a selector, as he has been in the past. I mean, you're not going to go up to the coach and say, hey, I've got a problem with that ball outside the off stump. I say, well, you go back and play your club cricket and sort it out there. You're not going to do that. I mean, that's why I get a little bit frightened about coaches.
I can imagine. Now, there's a discussion that we've had earlier which really interested me. Tell me about when you first found out about playing for Australia. Tell us about that.
Well, I actually do a lot of coaching myself, and the kids ask lots of questions, which is great. And one of the questions that really I really like, he said, Mr. Walters, he said, who presented you with your baggy green cap? And I said, I would say the postman. They said, who? I said, the postie. I said, it comes through the mail. They can't believe that we got our gear actually sent through the mail, their blazers, our caps and whatever.
That seems to be a habit in your life. You get a lot of things sent in the mail that you're either not sure about, or what's a more recent example?
Well, actually quite funny, because only this week, a big package, about 8 foot long and so high, was lying in the hallway of our house, and it had been there for 4 or 5 days. And my wife only said this morning, she said, what's with that big box in the hallway? And I said, well, it's not mine. I said, I don't know what, I thought you had ordered a heater or air conditioning or a unit or something. But she said, no, it's for you. It was delivered by the courier. I didn't have to sign anything. They just said it's for you. So I opened it up, and here's a big photo, quite a large photo, a photo of myself, and up the top is a caption, is 100 Club. So those that have played 100 games for New South Wales obviously have been presented with this, but and I remember that happened a couple of years ago, that they were presented with that in a blazer, a captain's blazer, and there was a captain's blazer in there as well. So that was what the big box was all about. The postie or the courier would deliver that one as well. He
might be paying more attention to the postie from now on. It's interesting things
well,
are right.
Yes, I've got a big box to try and get rid of now.
Okay. Again, some of the times that I remember watching you play cricket, and I was marvelled by your ability to score runs. Let's just take us through that time when you scored that 100 in the one session, the last session of the day. Tell us about that experience.
Well, I guess you have your days where, I don't know, the ball seems a little bit bigger, or the bat's a bit wider, or something. The bowlers aim at the middle of the bat and hit it more often. I'm not sure, but you have the odd day, and not many of those days that the ball tends to hit the middle of the bat more often. But that was certainly one, and it was just an incredible situation, really, because Greg Chappell had got out just before tea, and normally when two batsmen cross, there are not too many words spoken, just bad luck and a good luck normally. That's about it. But on this occasion, Greg Chappell said, I got out so you could get 100 in the last session. Now, I didn't even say bad luck. I just went out to bat. And at tea, I was 3 not out. And I walked back into the dressing room at tea and I said, what do you mean you got out so I could get 100 in the last session? He said, well, we need quick runs. He said, you're the man. He said, we need... I said, you wouldn't have got out. And I said, you don't get out to give your mother a hit. You wouldn't get out to do that. Anyway, as it turned out, I had drinks. I think I was 68. And then I lost strike. I was batting with Ross Edwards and lost strike for 27 minutes. I didn't face a ball for 27 minutes, including drinks. And he got a single off the last ball of 3 overs in a row after drinks, 8-ball overs. So I'm on 93 come the last over of the day, and he's done the same thing. He's got a single off the previous 8th ball. So I'm down the other end. He got hit on the pads the first ball of that last over, and I said, get down the other end. And so the first ball that I faced, Willis dropped me a short pitch ball, which I went to hook, and that was one exception. It didn't get the middle of the bat. It got the top edge and went straight over Alan Knott, the wicketkeeper's head, bounce into the side screen for 4. Not a very convincing shot, but they still count, 97. Now, there are 6 balls to come. I know he'd been averaging at least 4 short ones and over, so I got another 2 or 3 to come. I'll just get on the back foot and wait for the next one. And he didn't give me another one until the last ball, and I knew he couldn't help himself because he had 2 blokes behind the square on the fence. And fast bowlers just, they just can't throw it up again. So the last ball was a short one, but I don't know how I got it from where I got it to down there. It would have been far easier to sneak it over the top of third man somewhere, but it was just, I guess one of those lucky days. So,
Fantastic.
and the ball just went over the line, and 93 to 97 to 101, which was 3 not out at tea, so that made it 100, but yeah, it was my day.
Fantastic. Thanks, Doug. We'll now go to a break on TV Arcana. Welcome back to Through the Eyes of a Cricketer. I've got Doug Walters here, and he's been telling some amazing stories, not just of his cricket, but what happens around cricket. There's a question I've got for you, Doug. I often think in terms of a player with great talent as opposed to temperament. They're 2 qualities of a player that you see, like, for example, a Chanderpaul, who's probably predominantly a temperament player and his talent is not that high. In your situation, in your career, you're obviously very talented. Would you have liked to have had or thought of having more temperament than your own talent?
I don't think so. I think talent. Well, they obviously go together. I mean, you have to have both. But talent is there's no substitute for talent. I mean, you get some cricketers, and the one that you've used is probably a good example. But the self-made cricketers, I guess. I mean, if I can take you back to Rick McCosker days, I mean, Rick McCosker wasn't a great talented cricketer, right, but he was a very dedicated cricketer, and he made himself into a cricketer that could graft out runs and do that. I mean, if Rick was more talented, I'm sure he would have been a fantastic, great player. I mean, he was a very good player as he was, but I think talent. There's no. I'd rather have the talent, I think, than the temperament. I think you've got to have both. And I mean, temperament is not. This is what we're not talking about. What fast bowlers have in tempers. That is completely different, isn't it?
That's true. That's very true. Again, I was thinking about along the line of Geoffrey Boycott, for example. As you mentioned, Rick McCosker, they had certain amounts of quality that was around their temperament. But you've got a very good point. Without talent, you can't go all the way, can you? That's for sure.
No, you can't. And Boycott was one of the great players. I mean, we think of bowling to Boycott of bowling. We'd rather bowl up against a brick wall than bowl to Jeff Boycott. But Believe it or not, I got him out twice in Test cricket. So 2 of my wickets are Jeff Boycott. So I do admire those.
Do you remind him when you see him about those?
Well, I don't see him all that often, but I think I will next time I see him.
Why not? In fact, we're reminding him right now on TV, aren't we? Again, look at the modern cricketers. You look at a Virat Kohli or even Yunus Khan, for example. What do you think of their talents as opposed to temperament? Talk us through that. What do you see in those players?
Well, I don't know. I don't know them personally, so I don't know about their temperament, but they're fantastic players. I mean, they're just very good timers and hitters of a ball. I mean, they pick the ball up so early, and that's what a good player has to do. I mean, the difference between a Mark Waugh and a Steve Waugh, or a Greg Chappell and an Ian Chappell, if you like, was the fact that Mark would pick the ball up and be in position a lot quicker than Steve. Greg Chappell would be the same. He would pick the ball up and be in position a lot better than Ian. But if you wanted 2 guys to fight for your life, you want to go and watch Mark and Mark Waugh bat and Greg Chappell bat. But if you wanted 2 blokes to bat for your life, you would want Steve and Ian Chappell in that side.
That's very good points. Very good points. Again, the Virat Kohlis at today's age, and the batting equipment they use, or a Chris Gale, they use certain equipment which is obviously, you would argue, more superior in terms of weight and size, etc. What's your thoughts about that compared to the players that you played against them?
I don't have a problem with the bats. I think the bats are sensational. They're a lot heavier. I used a toothpick, they used to say, 2 pound 3 ounce. These guys are using bats just over 3 pound, but they feel like they pick up like 2 pound 3 bats. That's the thing. I mean, they're far better balanced than what our bats used to be. So I don't have a problem with that, and people want to see the ball hit a long way, and I'm one of those. But I do have a problem with the boundaries being brought in such long distances. I mean,
unless you're batting, of course, that wouldn't be too bad.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, the bowlers are being penalised enough as it is, but without being penalised a little bit more. I do have a problem with the boundaries. Well, they reckon they're only 18%, but when you see some of those grounds, they're in a lot more than 18%, I can tell you that.
I had a conversation with a learned colleague about your cricket, and obviously you've got a fantastic record, but he did talk to me about the situation on English wickets and the differences there. And his idea, which I agree with, is that you were an example of yourself. You were such a good batsman and you saw the ball so well and so early that may have actually been a hindrance in a way in England. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. I mean, the English wickets, and they were uncovered. We've got to remember the fact that they were uncovered during my 4 tours of England. But I'm not making excuses about that. A good English wicket, you won't get a better wicket to bat on anywhere in the world. But the good English wickets, we were 4 for 400 when I went in to bat. And I'm never going to get any more than 20 runs if we're 4 for 400. Don't worry about that. I'm not going to get 100 in those situations. But 4 for 20, that's a different story. And the wickets were quite soft. They were a lot softer than our wickets. And the ball seems a lot more, not necessarily swings, although we have seen in recent times the ball swing rather than seam. But they were seaming wickets rather than doing it in here. And I saw the ball go. And I did pick the ball up fairly well, and I chased it. When the good players just go straight down the line and miss it, and I used to laugh at those guys. I mean, they'd play and miss 5 out of 6 and over sometimes. And I thought, how can anybody play and miss all that time? And they were the smart players, not me, that sort of ball and chased it. And I still had to try and do something with it, but it didn't work in England. And
you scored 280s in your first match in England, though, didn't you?
My first test, and they were in Manchester, and I think Manchester was the worst of all the test ground wickets that I played on. So, and in fact, I scored 380s, and they were all at Manchester.
There you go.
But I guess if those 380s had become hundreds, then we wouldn't be talking about the fact that I couldn't bat in England.
That's right. Again, your career, I mean, one magnificent innings in New Zealand, against New Zealand, where you scored 250. Tell us about that. Thorns?
Yeah, well, that's probably the worst 20 I ever scored in my life, the first 20. I mean, I scratched and played and missed, and that was a seaming wicket as well, incidentally, in Christchurch. And Sir Richard Hadley, he was bowling, and bowling pretty well in those days. So yeah, it was the worst 20 I ever scored in my life, but obviously the best 200 after that I ever scored. But yeah, again, I don't know whether he or the other guys as well started aiming at the middle of the bat, and they were hitting it pretty often. But yeah, that's quite different.
Yeah, we talked earlier about getting the Australian cap, but that's one of your most cherished memories. Talk us through the moment when you actually found out about your Australian cap.
Oh, well, I can still tell you exactly where I was. I was sitting in my mini mono outside the Paddington Post Office, and my father was in the car, and we just come from the Sydney Cricket Ground, just finished a Shield match, and the 8 o'clock news, they were going to announce the Australian team, and so we pulled in there, and at the end of the news, up come my name. I mean, with a name starting with W, it's always read out in alphabetical order, of course, and I had to wait quite some time, but that was the greatest thrill I ever had in my life.
Yeah, it's a great memory that I would love to have had one day myself, but unfortunately I never got that far. Now, Doug, the current situation that's happening with the Australian ACA and Cricket Australia and the MOU that they're talking about, share some thoughts of what you're thinking about that.
Well, I think the players have got to be very careful, as does Cricket Australia. The players are on a pretty good wicket. They're getting paid very handsomely, particularly our players. I don't know, I can't talk about the overseas players, because I don't know what they're on, but our players are on fantastic money, and I think it's quite often the manager's fault. I mean, players have managers these days, and the managers get a bit greedy. I mean, I know certain players are probably, they're only, what they're getting paid from Cricket Australia is probably only less than a quarter of their overall income. And you've got the Chris Gales of the world that can go and just play 2020 cricket around the world and earn sensational money. But overall, that's not good for Test cricket. We've got to have Test cricket. If we don't have Test cricket, 2020 is just not going to carry us around forever. I mean, you got to have some style of cricket and some aim for cricketers to go for cricketers. So they've got to be very careful in where they trade.
So 30 June is the deadline that they're talking about with the contracts now. Do you see the possibility they could go down the track of having just individual agents' contracts, not a Cricket Australia contract, so they play for a part of the season and that's it, which is a very different concept, not unlike T20?
Yeah, well, we don't want that to happen. I mean, we are playing, I mean, the West Indies, we want the West Indies to be strong again, and they're not going to be strong again until we get their best players all playing. I mean, we're at the moment paying the Chris Gales of this world, if you like, not to play Test cricket, to go and play 2020 cricket everywhere around the world. I mean, every country now has a 2020 contract or competition, and these players can earn big dollars by just going and doing that. Now, we don't want that to happen. We want to foster Test cricket. There's no substitute for cricket, no substitute for Test cricket.
So, Doug, your experience in playing in the subcontinent, for example, in India, and I believe also Sri Lanka, tell us about those experiences.
Well, my only tour was 1969. We had a triple header, really, when we toured Sri Lanka. In those days it was Ceylon, India, and then we went on to South Africa after that. But we played 2 or 3 warm-up games in Sri Lanka on the way to India, which were quite interesting. Then we were in India for 3.5 months or so. I mean, the whole tour was 2 days longer than 7 months, so the tours were a little bit longer. The boys say that they're on tour all the time these days. Well, they're not on tour for 7 months at a time like it used to be. But our 3 months or 3.5 months in India was, yeah, I guess very educational from a cricketing point of view. And I mean, it certainly taught me how to play spin bowling. I mean, and I think that's a very important part of anyone's equipment. I mean, you've got to play, you've got to be able to play spin bowling pretty well. And some of the wickets were real turners, I can tell you. And we actually won the series in India in 1969, 3-1, but we could have just as easily lost the series 3-1. And Nawab Patodi was the captain of India in those days. They had two brilliant spinners in Bishan Bedi and Prasanna, and they had a couple of other spinners too. They Solkar and someone else. They carried four spinners, and they only had one opening bowler who would bowl probably 2 overs in a match, and that was it. So they were interesting times.
Tell us about the grounds in India and your experience walking onto a ground as a cricketer, through the eyes of you as a cricketer. Tell us about that experience.
Well, the grounds were a lot different to what they are now. I mean, they're lovely green grassed ovals these days, but there wasn't a lot of green grass on some of the grounds, or any of the grounds that I can recall. I remember playing at a place called Guwahati, and Guwahati. You wouldn't have thought they'd seen rain for 25 years, but their average rainfall is something like 350 inches a year, and it's unbelievable. So when it gets dry, it dries out very quick.
Again, Sri Lanka. Tell us about that. I mean, I'm personally very fond of the food. How did you find the food and the conditions there?
Yeah, I'm not a spicy eater, so I was very careful of what I did eat on those tours. In fact, we'd have eggs for breakfast, chicken for lunch, chicken for dinner for pretty much 4 months in Sri Lanka and India, and up until 2 years ago I hadn't eaten any chicken, so I still eat eggs, but it's only the last couple of years that I've gone back and have the odd little bit of chicken these days.
No baked beans? You weren't doing anything regarding
Well, no, but I probably should have. No, I'm not a spicy man, but the Indian curries, a mild Indian curry, I quite like that. Yeah.
So Sri Lanka, India and South Africa on the one tour for 7+ months.
Yeah. The last 3 months in South Africa weren't all that brilliant. We got beaten 4-0 in the 4 tests that we played over there.
Amazing.
But going from slow turning tracks in India to fast seaming tracks in South Africa was overnight was a little difficult.
So how many was in the squad around that time?
We had 17. There's just the normal 17 guys. And
did you lose a few on the way through?
no, everyone got probably 24-hour sickness. That was all. Graham McKenzie, he was our trump bowler in those days, and he picked up something because he wasn't half the bowler that in South Africa that he had been. He bowled brilliantly in India actually on those slow turning wickets. I think he got 27 wickets in that series. So, but he got one for 367, I think, in South Africa, and the only wicket he got, someone stood on his stumps, but he wasn't a quarter of the bowler, and he was bowling no balls. He'd never bowled a no ball in his life.
And we talked earlier about walking onto the SCG, and obviously Lords was another experience where you walked onto the ground. Tell us, walking onto a ground in India, the sound, the feel, what did that feel like?
Yeah, the crowds were the grounds were full. I mean, Test cricket today, they fill them up for one-day matches, but not necessarily Test cricket. But the grounds were full, and the crowds would be sleeping outside the grounds for days before a Test match started. We would get 30,000, 40,000 people turn up to watch us practice the day before a Test match. It was quite unbelievable, the experience of the crowds in India. They were amazing and very intelligent they knew everything about cricket as well. Oh. And this is in the days, in 1969, I think they had 3 television sets in India. Now they've got over 3 billion television sets in India. So times have changed a little bit. So they would have picked all this up through, and in my coaching days, I tell the kids that I learned to play cricket watching through the radio. And they say, you mean listening through the radio, don't you? I said, no, I used to watch through the radio because the commentators would describe things in such a manner that we could actually see what was going on. And these people in India, they watched through the radio as well because they were very knowledgeable about their cricket.
Something is missing in current day time, isn't it, with radio? Perhaps there's more listening rather than watching, as you're saying.
That's it. Well, yeah, I guess the television tells the pictures, but these guys, the commentators in the past, they told us exactly what was happening. And in fact, so well did they do it and we used to play our test matches in our back side veranda or backyard, and being the younger brother, I was always had to be England or India or whoever we were playing Test cricket against. I was never Australia. So I had to bowl in a fashion like these guys that we were playing against. And if we had someone bowl left-handed, we had to bowl left-handed, or batted left-handed, we had to do that. But the commentators would describe it in such a manner that blokes would have certain stutter in their run-up, or it'd come around at a different angle. And so much so that I actually played against a couple of guys that I'd never seen bowl a ball in my life before. But he'd be halfway through his run-up and I would be down the other end smiling, thinking, how good did I get this guy when I was practicing in the backyard? And it made it a little bit easier for us to bat against some of those guys.
It's an amazing story. That is so real. It almost wants me to turn the TV off and go back to radio full time.
Well, I'm glad with the television coverage.
Again, thanks, Doug. That's been fantastic. I really appreciate that. I think we've got a lot more to talk about post-break. Stay tuned with TV Arcana. Welcome back to TV Arcana on Through the Eyes of a Cricketer. Doug Walters, I'd like to ask you a few more questions about some of the most famous TV ads that you were involved with. Now, there's quite a few that I can recall that you had yourself involved with, including the World Series cricket. Tell us about those experiences and what you went through.
Well, World Series cricket was a unique period in cricket history, really. I mean, I guess we can turn around and thank Kerry Packer for a lot of things, and the guys these days would probably thank Kerry Packer for their financial rewards rather than the changes that he made to cricket. And I think the fact that they started playing cricket at night with coloured balls and coloured gear, they were big changes. And the women started to get involved in cricket more so. I mean, there were a certain percentage of women that were involved in cricket before Kerry Packer came on the scene, but I think they more than tripled after World Series cricket started.
Was it about your good looks at all? Was that anything to do with it? Or?
Well, I'm not sure about the good looks, but I'm not sure. I think just the colour, and I guess the television coverage itself was pretty good. I mean, pretty unique. I mean, was quite different to the ABC, where we had just the cameras from one end, and they used to televise a cricket match with one camera, and Kerry would have 9 or 10 cameras around the ground covering it from all sorts of angles. So, yeah, he did say that your faces will be renowned all around the world very shortly after you see this. And yeah, he done things properly.
The very first game under lights. Share us that moment.
Well, the first game under lights was at the old football stadium in Melbourne, VFL Park. That was different. We'd practiced. We'd thrown balls around, and we threw a lot of different coloured balls before we come up with a white one. He had cricket balls of every colour known to man. The white one seemed to be the one that most preferred. These days, it's still predominantly white. I mean, they use the pink ball now in Test cricket, and so yeah, the lights were different, I suppose. Just the fact that we were playing at night time when we should have been in the bar having a drink. I think that was the main difference.
So it prohibited you a bit to have a drink?
Well, I did, yeah.
Look, I mean, imagine the time, again, we've got the likes of an Imran Khan bowling to you, or quite frankly, you were fortunate enough not in World Series cricket, but otherwise to have Jeff Thomson at one end as well. But tell me about the bowling, the faster bowlers coming in at you through your eyes as a cricketer then.
Yeah, I think the lights were measured brighter than sunlight, so there wasn't a problem with the black side screens with the white cricket ball. I mean, you could pick the ball up pretty well, and I don't think anyone had a problem with that. And it got when they tried a yellow ball or an orangey ball, and that sort of had a little tail on the end of it, or appeared to have. So that was a little different, but no, the lights were fine.
Let's take you to that time as well. And I was talking more about also the TV commercials at the time. The World Series cricket had magnificent TV commercials, but there's a lot of other commercials you were involved with as well. Can you recall some of those?
Well, all my commercials are beer related, I guess. Tooheys related. So yeah, I had a lot of fun doing those with my old mate Maxie Walker. The 2.2 ads, they were sensational ads. They were unbelievable.
Well, they broke ground, didn't they? They made cricket like mainstream, even on the commercials networks. That was very much a way that they showed mateship.
Yeah, it did, and I guess Mojo, the company that put those ads together, and they put World Series cricket ads together, they'd done it in such a way that it was a nice jingle and yeah, some quite comical moments.
In fact, we look at the time with Jeff Thomson, Dennis Lillee, that you were very often playing on the same side, but there were times when you weren't. Tell us about that.
Yeah, people say you wouldn't have faced too much of Tomo and Lillee. I said, hey, I'd faced more balls from Tomo and Lillee than I did from all the other bowlers put together, because they were there at practice every day, and twice a year we'd play against them in state cricket. And Tomo, before he disappeared, occasionally in club cricket here in Sydney. But yeah, not pleasant memories facing Jeff Thomson, I can tell you. There are other bowlers in the world that you would much prefer to face than Tomo and Lillee, although I didn't have the same problem with Lillee, because I knew Dennis is such an accurate bowler. He would 8 ball overs, as I said, we used to play. He would be in that zone 8 times out of 8, but Tomo very seldom got into that vision span. I mean, I talk of vision span of probably so wide, a foot in the old scale, I say. And if they get in there, you have to do something with them, but if they're outside that, you don't have to worry. Well, Tomo 6 out of 8 wouldn't have got in that zone, and that's what made Tomo such a fearsome bowler, because when he did get in that 8, in that zone, he was yeah. You had to make sure you were doing something. You'd be on the full on your toe or aiming towards your head. He made you sit up and take notice.
And it's interesting how you talk about the ball coming short to you, and you're wearing no protection at the time, most of the time. Tell us about that. If you look at that as a comparison to now with the amount of helmet coverage they've got.
Yeah, well, we didn't know any difference, I guess, because there weren't helmets around. And, but to me, the helmet is like seatbelts in cars. They save lives, and it's common sense that you should wear one. And the kids now, they grow up wearing a helmet from the time they walk out to play their first cricket match. So they get used to them. But yeah, the helmets only were in for the last 2 years that I played cricket, and I never quite got used to using them.
But describe the helmets back then. I think there's a story.
Well, they were quite different. I mean, if those that saw Tony Greig and Dennis Amos walk out in World Series cricket with motorbike crash helmets on, I mean that just fired Dennis Lilly and Tomo up a little further. They wanted to send those guys to the pedal beater shop to get them fixed. They had something big to aim at in those days. So, but yeah, the one I had had a sort of a visor and down the front of it, and a little glass viewing area there. But they were very uncumbersome. They took a lot of getting used to, and I don't think I ever really got used to them. And then a little later they had those bars. Well, I couldn't get used to those bars at all. But the plastic visor, you'd leave it and throw it in your bag, and it would be all scratched. And so yeah, they were interesting days.
Now, by the time when you didn't wear a helmet, which was before that period, tell us about that. You were never hit, were you, by a ball?
No. We had probably the odd glancing blow, but nothing serious. I mean, why players didn't get seriously hurt more often, I don't really know. But we must have watched the ball a little bit closer, perhaps, than what they do these days. They have the protection on, and they get in behind it, and you see the guys get hit quite often on the helmet, and I don't know why. We must have watched it a little closer than what they watch it today. I don't know why, but we could have the way of it one way or another.
So, Doug, we've talked about fast bowlers like Jeff Thompson. Let's talk through some of the actual spinners that you faced compared to the spinners of today.
Well, I guess in our day there were more bowlers that bowl leg breaks rather than orthodox off break or orthodox left hand spinners. Everyone done something in our team. But because of Australian conditions, I guess, of fellas like Bob Simpson and Norm O'Neill, for example, they all bowled fairly useful leg spinners. But everyone did something just to, and they could have, the whole team would actually bowl in some particular matches. But I guess times have changed. I mean, I didn't have a great deal of problems with spinners. Only the left arm orthodox was the one that I had more problems with. Derek Underwood and Bishan Beatty, they were two of bowlers that I had problems with. I mean, I obviously would have had problems with Shane Warne and I guess Nathan Lyon these days. Nathan Lyon has developed into a top bowler. Ashley Mellett, style bowler in my day. I mean, I didn't have a problem with Ashley Mellett, but Bishan Beatty and Derek Underwood, they were the two guys that troubled me. Derek Underwood got me out more than anyone else, so I've got to say he was the best. But today, I mean, the wickets, the overseas wickets are predominantly spinning wickets, so the guys have got to prepare themselves in a different manner, and our batsmen haven't been doing that up until now.
I mean, examples of Ranganahera and Murali from Sri Lanka, they're there too, that seem to have really stood out over the recent time.
Oh, fantastic bowlers. I mean, there's no doubt, and they're good bowlers, not only on their own grounds but overseas as well. And that, if you can bowl spin successfully in Australia, you're a great bowler.
This has been a fantastic interview. I really appreciate your time, Doug. And again, thank you very much for coming on Through the Eyes of a Cricketer.
My pleasure. Nice to be with you.
Stay tuned for the next episode of Through the Eyes of a Cricketer.